Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming to our session on supercharging your claims processes with analytics, or it will be in a moment. My name is Ryan Park Grant. I'm a product manager with our analytics group. And I came to Guidewire in order to help build the products and release the products that became Compare and Canvas that we debuted 10 years ago at Connections. And so I'm very proud to see that they got some exposure on the main stage and maybe won't be the best kept secret in Guidewire anymore as they were for so long. And I also work with embedding analytics across all of our products. I volunteered to do the whole session today, but they said, no, Ryan, you need to have a grown-up in the room with you. So Scott is here as well. I'm going to turn over to him in a little bit. He can introduce himself. How many of you are running Claim Center today? How many insurance now? Yeah, we see you. We see you. How many are self-managed? And how many cloud? All right, that leaves a bunch of you who aren't running either, so I don't know what you guys are doing. You might want to come talk to somebody afterwards. Most of what we're going to talk about today is fully applicable to self-managed as well as to cloud. There's a few exceptions. Like Mike said this morning, there may be a couple things that are suboptimal, but don't tell him that I said this. You can get more optimal with analytics self-managed than you can with any other piece of the Guidewire stack. Because we can give you the capabilities that we give to our Flame customers with a retrofit of your Claim Center system and the embedded analytics framework that I'm going to show and the analytics manager that lets you configure in Claim Center. We can get that up and running in your test system in a couple hours maybe. How long you take from there to test it and promote it is your problem. But this is something that you should look at in the whole context of your cloud journey to say, what can we take advantage of now, soon, and eventually, and to not think of it as an Insurance Suite only migration, or Insurance Now for that matter. Has anybody read this far enough to read the side effects? And that you do have to be present to win the contest? It's in there. I wanted to start the presentation with a cultural reference. And the pinheads in legal said, you can't show the cultural reference because of licensing reasons. So I had to come up with this instead. Can anybody recognize who this is? It's the fiddler on the roof. I know, groan, huh? How many of you have seen Fiddler on the Roof or in musical film? Okay, a bunch of you. In actuality, it's about centered on a man named Tevye, who lives in a European village, old world, and he delivers the milk cans around the village. And he is known for one particular word that he sings. Anybody? Tradition! Sorry for my voice. And meaning the way we've been doing things the same way for a very long time. And if you're coming to this session, then I'm sure you are very familiar with a tradition in insurance companies and claims analytics in particular, which is the Analytics Project. Doesn't have quite the same ring, probably won't be on Broadway. But like delivering milk to the village, it's another thing that we've been doing the same way for a very long time. And I pulled up, these are actually my slides from last year, and we were talking about how hard these analytics projects are and how each, Carl has got to go figure out how to even get the data out of the system in the first place. Tiffany's got to use different tools to try and build a model out of it. Dana has to think about how we're going to do the integration into the core system, how are we going to show it, how are we going to write business rules, and then Jackson has to figure out how to write a report that would tell you all of this. And they're all doing their tasks sequentially, doing a lot of work that is manual and not really adding value that is specific to their company. So this can take months to do. And if they do escape the vortex of inertia and despair, then you have to go right into the next round of refreshing that model or taking on another analytics project. So we were talking then and now about how Guidewire can help automate large parts of this process, that these people become overseers and shepherds of the process, and they can spend their time on pieces that really are specific to their company and their needs, and that add value. And we were referring to that as the smart loop. This year we have a new slide. It's cooler because it's in black, and it moves the words into different places. And we've been using System of Insight because really what we're talking about is bigger than just the loop of that project. And but the danger is that talking about how we can improve that process can inadvertently just reinforce the tradition of the analytics project. And we run the danger that we end up helping Tevye take his milk cans around the village a little faster, when what we really want to do is rethink the whole process and industrialize and make lots and lots of beer. And we often use the idea of the assembly line, very common metaphor, right? It's not like I made it up, for how we think about the claims process. And I think that's because we have an intuitive understanding of how a factory got to this state. Was some combination of figuring out the particular bottlenecks, excuse me for the pun, in the line, but then also sometimes stepping back and saying, how do we need to rebuild the next factory that's going to have capabilities that we didn't even imagine in the last one? And so the point for our purpose in claims is that instead of thinking analytics project first, we want to think workflow first. And to ask questions like these: what is the ideal fast track workflow? How would we do it if we weren't hamstrung by all our past limitations and assumptions? We trusted every step of the way to be done right. What stops our claims from following the happy path? Where do we lack that trust that we can make a payment without too much indemnity leakage, that we can know whether a car needs to be repaired or salvaged, and et cetera? And then which analytics solutions can keep more claims moving? Where those sticking points are, what's going to help? And that may lead you back to an analytics project, right? We have the data internally to answer that question. Let's go do it, produce a model, and that's going to help. But it may lead you somewhere else entirely. It may lead you to some kind of external data. It may lead you to a model that somebody else has built. It may lead you to a partner solution in the broader ecosystem that is right for you. And whatever it is, that you can then use Guidewire tooling to install, monitor, and adjust quickly. I love the phrase continuous improvement. We've been using it for a long time. But all too often, it seems the emphasis is on the continuous rather than the improvement. We're continually running on this treadmill, and by the time like I said, we finish one thing, it's time to start on another. Instead of the intended idea, right, is that we get quick feedback on whether what we're doing is working, and we make changes, and we get quick feedback on whether those changes helped, and are we actually impacting the things that we care about in our business. Whether it's the sort of more leading edge KPIs of how's the workflow happening, or the longer term ones that are the ultimate point of the business. So I want to go through a couple examples to talk about that, and I'm going to start with this one of weather damage to the roof, and just walk through a very simple possible version of an ideal workflow, which starts with confirm loss date and location. Standard stuff, made easier with digital intake. Confirm coverage, it's why you have an integration to your policy system. Confirm damage. This is a lot easier than it used to be now that we're all carrying high-resolution digital cameras in our pockets and can send pictures, right, to say this is what my roof looks like. Confirm loss cause. Okay, now this is where we tend to get gummed up. Because how can you tell the difference between a real hailstorm that was the proximate cause, as they say, of the roof damage, or a shady contractor with a hammer and a golf ball going around telling people he can get them a new roof? And at the time that most of our processes were set up, the answer of like how you would learn what the actual weather was at the time might be go to the corner store and buy a newspaper, consult the almanac. Now, more recently, you can at least get YouTube videos of guys who, use that camera in their pockets to say, dude, look at the big balls of ice falling out of the sky. But most of us are probably doing the traditional thing and sending somebody out to look. How many of you have property lines of business where you are processing roof claims? All right, a bunch. So keep your hands up if you investigate almost every claim in person. Okay, quite a few. And if you didn't put your hand back up, come up afterwards and tell me what you are doing, and whether it's like this or something completely different. I'm very curious to learn. But how could we rethink that process if we had a way to know that, yes, indeed, for certain, chunks of ice this big fell out of the sky in that exact place on that exact date? Then maybe we could go straight to sending a trusted roofer in our repair network and paying the invoice when done. No site inspection, no leakage, no delay, no bigger bill because another storm came through before a repair could get scheduled. And imagine what that homeowner is going to be telling their neighbors about the quick service that they experienced from your company. So, maybe your process isn't ready for this right now. How many of you have a direct repair network for roofing where you would trust to do this if everything else were in place? Okay, a few hands, but not that many. And, if you have a process set up around, always going to look and just deciding to write a check, then of course, why would you? So the overall point is if we step back and say, what would we want the ideal process to be, then how might we choose to build new capabilities in order to take advantage of what's out there? Some of you just are saying, like, does the product actually do it? How does it work? So this is an example of a weather alert that has been pushed directly into Claim Center. In this case, it's a wind claim, and it says loss cause of wind does not match observed weather at claim location and date, but severe weather occurred nearby, and that's shown in tabular form and in a visual thumbnail there. And you can click through to our Canvas application to see that more interactively. In this case, we see that there was a lot going on. There were wind and lightning on different dates. There's a tornado swath down there in the corner in green. But on the date of the claim itself, there was actually a big hailstorm that came through. And maybe it's as simple as we got the loss cost wrong in taking the claim in at first notice. Say, okay, yeah, it's a hail claim, everything else confirmed, put it back on the conveyor belt, and on it goes. Or maybe the story doesn't add up, and this is one you do decide to go out and inspect. And we have, by the way, we have this historical data for sort of an expanding footprint from US, Canada, Europe, coming soon, Australia, New Zealand. So second example is automobile or motor claims. And I won't try and build out what, as you all know, can be a complicated set of activities. Instead, I stole this graphic from Autopilot. And that's because Autopilot, the marketing of it, and of course the very name, emphasizes increasing automation, right? And that's powerful. It saves, can have a lot of savings in itself. But the true significance of it actually goes deeper than that, because it's a forcing function for exactly what we're talking about here. You need to think through what is the best way for something to run through the system. And you create this, well, it's no longer a mental model. Once you get it down in Autopilot, it's a real model of that workflow. And you think, well, what do I need to know at each one of these nodes and decision points in order to decide, does it go green, does it go yellow? And that's what we're talking about in terms of adding these solutions. So, just as some quick examples of those kinds of things that analytics can help with, segmentation and assignment is a simple or a complex claim. Might there be an unreported injury that we would want to investigate in person, even if the physical damage to the vehicle isn't that great? Is the damage to the vehicle enough that the car should be salvaged as a total loss, or is it repairable? Is an injury likely to escalate into a severe or litigated claim? Or is there a possibility of fraud that should be investigated? And last example, is there opportunity for subrogation? Might we be able to recover some of what we paid out from the other driver's insurer? And so all of these decisions and more can be enhanced with analytics to really push the frontier of the possible in how you're always balancing the constraints of operational efficiency and preventing leakage and keeping your customers satisfied. And you can push the bubble out in terms of what's possible to achieve your optimal solution. So again, any of these solutions can be embedded into ClaimCenter with our analytics manager. What I show you here is just another table in ClaimCenter, right? You've all seen tables in ClaimCenter. But each one represents a decision point at one of those nodes and an ability to either keep something moving without any attention or to bring it to the right person for their expert judgment. And like I said, many of the times, nobody even needs to see or know what that decision was based on, right? Behind the scenes, you'll know that, but the person on the front line doesn't. But there are some situations, like a warning that this might escalate into a severe claim, where the whole point is you're bringing it to an experienced adjuster and saying, hey, we need your thoughts on this one. These are the reasons that we see why this looks like claims that turn bad, but we want you to consider whether this needs to be escalated for help from your supervisor. or a red one might be automatically referred higher. And you can configure what you want to display here, but in this instance, you notice that what we're not showing is a dollar estimate. That's what the model was. The model put in all of the claims and the amount you paid and all of these predictive factors. This is just demo model. As you know, real models would have a much longer list, be more interesting. But so behind this, there's a dollar estimate from the predictive model. But that's not, in this particular instance, it might be in others, but in this particular instance, that's not what we want this expert to consider, right? Because it's a false precision. You all know that. And if we showed them that our estimate was $75,633, right? And it's like, no, but this one's worth 50 or this one's worth 100, when the real point was it's up in that range, right? So that's why we want to drive things off of the recommendation and not off of the math, so to speak. And it's part of the setup in the business process to say, where do those thresholds go where we want to recommend this path versus that path? So as I just mentioned, one of the examples is that we can do this way is a subrogation likelihood model. And that, again, might be something that you would build quickly with your own data. Or even more quickly, you might install an existing solution and have certainly quicker time to value and immediate ROI from a model that we build for you. And so we were pleased to see this highlighted on the main stage this morning. I'm going to invite Scott up to tell us a little more about subrogation predictive scores.
All right, excellent.
Oh,
thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
He'll be back. All right, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of sort of a new approach, right? Talking about tradition. This is really coming from the concept of the data cooperative, that community-powered AI that Mike talked about this morning, and the idea that we can potentially do things a little bit differently to help you all out. I'll be diving into this in a session tomorrow afternoon at 2:15 if you want to hear more about that. But give you a preview here now. So we all know that subrogation is sort of, the stepchild in the claims handling process, right? We've all seen the reports that there's always opportunity here. And a lot of times that's really because there's always challenges, right? How do I identify what can really be subrogated, what's got a good likelihood of recovery, and do that quickly? How do I prioritize? No one's going to go triple the size of their subrogation team any day soon, I suspect. So how do you really prioritize what they work on such that they can actually extract the most value from the highest likelihood claims? And so sort of to tackle that, what we did is we built a pre-built predictive model, right, which provides predictive scores to you. So just think about calling a credit score, right? I put a little bit of information in, and I get a signal back. This is the same way our predictive scores work. So for any auto collision claim, right, give us a few details that you have captured through that first notice of loss process. We want you to be able to get a score back early in the process such that you can start to affect the claims handling behavior. Because if anybody's tried to call a claimant after you've closed that claim and now you have a subrogation case open, but their car is repaired, they don't really want to return the phone call. They're all set. They're off. They're driving, right? So now you've made it harder on your subrogation team, even if you could collect, just to get that additional information. So what we did is built on our data cooperative, seated with our compare customers, is we took 1.3 million claims and built this solution out. It's pre-built. It's validated across the United States. It's validated across the 50 states. It's validated across multiple different companies, right? So you can rest assured that this solution, it may not be perfectly optimized for your book, but it's going to be a heck of a lot better than a model that you don't have running. And of course, the great thing with all the analytics we do here at Guidewire, we use our analytics manager tooling that Ryan was just talking about to deliver that directly into those workflows. Because having to go to another screen, refer to another aid, look it up on, how many stickies do your claims adjusters have on the side of their monitor with all the reminders of all the workflow things and job aids, and right? You do a lot of process work, right? The more we can keep people getting the information they need directly in the system they use, right on the screen that belongs to them, right? So for the claims handler on their screens, putting it on the subrogation screen for the subrogation folks to understand the priority. That's really what we're trying to accomplish here. And because it's pre-built, we can literally, like I put the real solution. You can come see it down in the exhibit hall. I'll demo it for you. Uh-oh, what are you doing? You got to keep the screen on here. You can see it demoed. I spool up the production solution and plug it into a Claim Center instance. It takes me about 15, 20 minutes, right? Of course, we're going to put it in. You're going to want to test it. You're going to want to validate it through your workflow, promote it through your environments. You could probably get it done in a week or two, right? But that's how quick we can put these pre-built solutions in, right? So that's kind of not the traditional way of let's spend a couple months, spool up that analytics project. So it's an option, right? It might not be for everybody. Let you take it for a test drive, let you test it out. But it gives you another option to do things in a slightly different way. And we think with that, you can really accelerate that business value that you deliver to your operation. So sort of talking about business value, we sat down and ran a bunch of different business scenarios here. And really what we found is on sort of common situations through which you might deploy the model, the ability to refer more quickly, the ability to prioritize what you look at. We think that basically you can get on the order of 23 basis points of improvement on your auto direct written premium. So put another way, if you've got a $250 million auto book, we can return $575,000 back to you, right, for a couple weeks worth of effort. That's a pretty good gamble, right? I actually don't think it's a gamble. That's just something you might want to do. So that's the idea. That's the non-traditional approach. We'll be providing more of these as we grow the cooperative over time, right, with the power of the community and the community power AI that Mike talked about. So with that, I'll hand it back to Ryan.
All right. One more point about what we call business impact monitoring, and I've mentioned it already. In most areas of life, you get pretty quick feedback about whether something worked, right? If you try a new skateboard trick, you don't need to call IT and ask them to run a report on whether you made it or not. You know. You feel. But how often is that not the case when we're talking about analytics projects? I built a model, I maybe even got it into production, and then what happened as a result? So that's why we've been working with our Explore team to make ready-built dashboards. And I mean, first of all, behind the scenes, and this is one thing that is cloud only, because when you call from Claim Center Cloud to one of these scoring solutions, any of them that we've shown up there, it also sends the recommendation that was made as a result to the cloud data platform and associates it with that claim so that then you can build dashboards like this, and this is an actual dashboard we built with a customer, showing it with permission, and that's why it's in the old UI, not the new ThoughtSpot one that they were showing you on the screen. And you can answer questions like, what was the outcome of the claims that we sent down the green, the yellow, versus the red path? Maybe we did A/B testing and we tried out two models, or kept the old workflow for a while for some folks and tested it out here. How did things progress after we implemented versus how they were before? to use the leading indicators to make those quick changes, but also to keep tracking. Ultimately, did it improve loss ratio? Did it improve customer satisfaction? And as we've been increasingly learning, improving employee satisfaction matters as well. Those are the things we ultimately want to, that's why we do analytics, right? Is to impact one of those things, not to have a cool Gini coefficient or things that data scientists necessarily care about and talk about. I was just going to my summary. There was another beer image. Oh yeah, there it is. I won't belabor the analogy any further. This is just to say that the legal folks also wouldn't let me show the Simpsons video, where guys watching the beer go by on the line, going beer, beer, mouse, beer, mouse, beer, beer. But this whole idea of how can we keep more things moving as simply as possible, and that comes down to thinking in terms of workflow first, analytics solution second, and monitor and adjust nimbly, quickly as well. So maybe at this point it'd just be simpler just to turn off the presentation so it doesn't flicker at us. Did you read the fine print that there may be some flashing images that can cause seizures? That was in that safe harbor. You'd be amazed what's in there if you read the whole thing. No, at this point, we'd be happy to take questions. We have plenty of time. So I've got some help from folks with microphones, or there's one on the stand here if anybody has for either Scott or myself. We should have planted someone. I gave Scott a question at his presentation yesterday at the Farm Bureau user group. You should have seen his face when I stood up and asked for a microphone. He's like, oh God, what's he going to ask?
Absolutely. No, surely there's a question, right?
Wait, there we go. Oh, another one here, but we'll start in the back.
Hey, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks very much. For the subrogation model, how did you choose the likelihood of subrogation versus like incorporating other factors like the potential cost of the monetary amount, like more of an expected value type of calculation?
What was the last part? Did you get the last part?
Why likelihood percentage versus dollar amount recovered to model on?
Yeah, again, it was really down to trying to get a model that you could fire right at first notice of loss, and the amount of data that we'd need to get to evaluation, especially if you think about just the value of repairing a car over the last 2 years, right? It's been interesting because using our compare tool, we've been watching the benchmarks as we talk to customers and evaluate that over time, right? But we're seeing huge swings in that dollar value. And again, it's interesting, it's helpful, but it's not really what the decision is on, right? The decision is really on, can I get the dollars in? Not is it $6,000 or $8,000, right? So that's in the background. The dollars are in the background, but the behavior and the decisioning is not really based on $6,000 versus $8,000. It's really based on I've got a high likelihood, so I really do want to chase this, versus I've got almost no chance of getting any money back on this claim, so I don't want to chase it. So it was really kind of a conscious decision about how do we really support a model across multiple companies that might write a slightly different book of business and have that model behave well, but really give you the information you need to make those better decisions every single time.
I would add too, you mentioned being able to run it at first notice, and often there's a limited amount of information. Of course, one of the benefits of current data science is it can work with unknown, right? It won't fail when something is missing. That's just another data point. But one thing that we have is the VIN, right? And we can go out and get a bunch of characteristics from the National Highway
safety transportation.
Safety, so, yeah, something, right? I mean, you guys all know what that VIN encodes, and how many of those became significant in the modeling process?
A large number, a large number. So we've probably got 8 or 9 different factors that we derive based on the VIN, so we can start to get aspects of the vehicle, such as the size, the type of vehicle, right? And so that is really a kind of a proxy for what happens in terms of damage and value that way as well. And so taking advantage of external data, plugging that in and augmenting what you already have. So we're already augmenting the data set in terms of pooling the customer data, but then we're reaching out and grabbing external data as well, right? And so by increasing the depth and the breadth of that sample that we can train a model on, we can start to really find more corners that have opportunity for you to improve your operation.
Yeah, and the other thing we know at first notice is a text loss description of what happened, right? And we have not traditionally, we still don't pull that for our data cooperative because of concerns that you all rightly have that there might be personal information written in those notes, right? Once you have free text, people can put in anything. So we're looking into how we can, resolve the security concerns, anonymization, and bring it to the point where we can use the text mining on it and get that extra level of insight. So we'll continue to work on this solution in that way as we look for other use cases that we can do as well. Sorry, we had a question here?
Can we also understand your roadmap coming to commercial side of the world?
Sure. So I mean, some of these solutions, like the property solutions, right? It actually doesn't matter whether it's homeowners or commercial property. Could work the same way. I mean, obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, the sweet spot tends to be more in the high volume claims, right? If you have a huge claim for a huge customer, you're gonna go look. It's its own special process, right? But when it's the mom and pop corner store, it's really not that different from homeowners, right? The subrogation model applies just as much to commercial auto. I mean, you wouldn't use it if you ran into another semi-truck, right? But just because it's commercial, if you have an accident with a fleet vehicle and somebody else's passenger vehicle, it's the same information. So I don't know if was there a particular use case you were thinking of?
I was thinking mostly on the severity models.
Yeah.
Just for the assignment.
Yeah, so similar thing. You would know when the kind of the conditions are more similar to personal lines, and when you could apply something there versus, oh, in this instance it's really not appropriate. And again, there's always that. I didn't mean to disparage too much. The draw from your own data. If whatever your book is based upon, then we can build models on that. So it can be a both and. You start with what you have, what you can put in immediately, and then ask your data scientists, can you come up with something better? Maybe you can. Great. Then we'll start using that.
Right. Or I think really, the other alternative is really the mix and match approach, right? Your data science team can only crank out so many models in any given year. So what do you want them working on that's really specific to your business, your portfolio? That's probably where you want your team really focused. What's your secret sauce? Is subrogation your secret sauce? If not, right, put this model in place. It's better than not having a model, and free up your data science folks to really worry about the parts of your business that are your secret sauce. You write a particular niche. Do you write in a particular area that's a little bit different? So it's really about giving you options, and how do you sort of optimize around those options, right? We're not here to take away anybody's secret sauce. We're really here to give you the capabilities to improve all aspects of your operation and really free your folks up. So whether that's your data scientists or your underwriters or your claim adjusters, how do we free them up to apply your secret sauce?
So when you were talking, the predictive analytics predicated on the FNOL data that was being received, What is the process or the flow behind as that data becomes more and more updated, that it's going to use those predictive analytics to help the adjusters identify those well after the FNOL when more investigative work has already been completed?
Yeah, so that was actually interesting. We actually originally started thinking we were going to build two models. We were going to build one that would fire at FNOL and one that would fire, I don't know, call it 60 days out when potentially you have additional information. And what we found was that the variation in that information was such that we actually got not a lot of extra lift for sort of the complexity that that second model would bring. And so we said, hey, let's just simplify down to firing right at first notice of loss. Because in most instances, with a very high percentage of alignment, that actually gives you a great indication. And now you're not sort of trying to do a small course adjustment. Then the grand scheme of things is really about, did I get this over to the subrogation team to work, and did I get it to them early enough, right? You know, throwing a couple more in, you actually got adjusters that are well aware of how to do that, right? You still probably got your closing checklists. I don't necessarily need a model to pick that up and the complexity it brought. We didn't think the value was there, which was not an expected finding, but that's sort of the interesting part when you build models, right? Sometimes you discover things that don't behave like you thought they were going to, and that's always interesting to learn from.
And it does depend on the use case. For things like injury severity or likelihood of a litigated claim, most of the customers we work with wouldn't even run that model until at least 30 days. And they build it with data that tends to be, you know, all filled in by that time, right? It may not be available at first notice. So again, it goes back to the workflow. Do you have a decision that you need to make at the moment you get the claim in? Then what's the best we can do with what we have that's better, you know, better than doing nothing or using your thumb to the wind, versus what, you know, can appropriately wait for later, and like, okay, if it hasn't closed in 30 days, then we want to know what's the chance it's going to spike.
Just curious about the factors that are used in the model. I mean, obviously, loss cause is going to be, you know, one of the key predictors. But is there any text mining done? You know, are you pulling data from accident descriptions, or what other kind of data are you pulling that has been found to be predictive for subro?
Yeah, so again, it's really the basics that are coming down at first notice of loss. Again, because of, you know, concerns around anonymization and inadvertent PII in those text descriptions that I can't control for when I'm looking at data across, you know, multiple different customers, we actually elected to leave that out. We don't collect that in the cooperative until we can, you know, really be assured that we can do that in a way that we don't bring that inadvertent PII around. So there is no text mining in this first model. Certainly our Predict software has natural language processing capabilities, so for any model that you would build on your own data, you can certainly take advantage of that. But really it's you know, the circumstances around the loss, it's the VIN, the loss cause, the coverage. Very few pieces of information are actually used because, again, right, you don't have a lot available at first notice of loss. And so that was actually one of our other findings was, you know, how good could we make a model that actually fires on that limited bit of information? And that's where really the depth of having so many claims going into it allowed us to extract that signal, even though sort of the breadth of information was relatively narrow. And that was where also adding that VIN lookup actually gave us a lot of lift as well, because it did allow us to take one piece of information and make it into multiple pieces of information.
And there's one piece of information that is not included in the model that might be surprising to you, which is fault rating.
Absolutely. So, you know, at the end of the day, right, there's different regulations in all the states, right? So we really want to get to the likelihood, assuming that you could, you know, recover that claim. You know when someone's been rear-ended at a stoplight, that you've got a recoverable there, right? You don't need a model to tell you that, right? But the ones that are a little more questionable, right? How do you divide those up? Which ones do you look at? Which ones do you refer? Maybe which ones do you do a little bit more investigation on? You know, do I actually order a police report where I might not have, you know, if I wasn't actually going to try to go negotiate with another carrier for that recovery. And so we actually opted to leave the fault rating out, because that's oftentimes a determination that doesn't get finalized till later on in the process, in order to, again, allow you at the minute that claim is filed to get that likelihood, to get those referrals made, to automate that process, such that you can get more lift out of your existing workforce than you could otherwise.
Or maybe your insured is in Minnesota and they said at first notice, oh, I'm sorry, it was my fault. But you, sorry, my parents are from Minnesota. But, you know, so the fault rating may be in there as, you know, our insured's fault. You know, you would think no subrogation opportunity, but the model sort of ignores that and looks at the other pieces and say, but this looks an awful lot like the kind of claims that we do get recovery on, and then maybe you revisit that.
Hey guys, so today we'll watch the subrogation model being presented. What is the future of Guidewire Predict for you guys? What are you guys working on for next few months in new models or something like that?
Yeah, so you heard, you know, Mike talk a little bit about our retention solution. So you'll be seeing a lot more activity around retention coming up. From a predictive score, pre-built predictive scores, we'll be looking to likely tackle total loss. So, you know, should I total this vehicle, save me the tow and appraisal costs? And then potentially we'll be looking at injury likelihood. Right? Is there a companion injury that we need to be worried about, injury severity? And, you know, that could be something from, again, commercial and personal auto, or we could also start to look at the comp space as well. You know, the real challenge from us from a product roadmap perspective is, you know, I don't want to put a model out there that just doesn't behave well for under multiple circumstances, because, again, it has to work for everyone in this room. And I think if you turn to the person next to you, you guys probably have a slightly different book of business. You probably operate in a different area. But we have to come up with a model that behaves well across sort of this audience. And so really what that means is that we actually have to fail quite a bit before we get one that we're comfortable with. And so putting a timeline on that can get really, really challenging. But we are working on others. I give you a sense for where we're putting our focus. As we develop models that we like and we believe are reliable, right, then you'll start to hear us announce them and add them to the catalog.
Yeah, and the focus right now is claims, because that's where historically we've had the compare application and the data sharing that's been, you know, happening for years. So, all right, I think we're at time. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.